following video contains spoilers for Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Today we're going to be rewriting the classic novel Little Women. Don't get me wrong, Little Women is a great book. One of the most well-written books I've ever read. Pride and Prejudice is great, but you just don't get to know Jane Austen's characters as well as you get to know the March sisters. Louisa May Alcott was able to create characters that readers really care about. I just wish that she had given these characters slightly different endings, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking this. Like, is there anyone out there who's really like,
wow, it would have been terrible if Beth had lived?
Since Little Women is in the public domain, I could technically rewrite it and publish my own version, but that's kind of a lot of work, so right now I'm just going to make a video talking about some of the things I would change about the book. First of all, let's talk about Meg. I have a couple different options of what to do with Meg, but the most important thing is that she doesn't marry Mr. Brooke. My main problem with Brooke is not his lack of money, but just that he was kind of a jerk to her after they're married. It's not just me. When my younger brother read the book, he thought Brooke was a jerk too. In the real book, Meg, who is actually a decent person, ends up with this poor guy, who is also kind of a jerk, while Amy, who is a little brat, ends up with Laurie, who is rich and nice. Both Meg and Amy wanted to be rich when they were grown up, and one of them did end up being rich, but why was it the bratty sister who got what she wanted instead of the good sister? So, in my story, option 1 is for Meg to marry Laurie. Joe was hoping that Meg would marry Laurie, and I don't know why Mrs. March thought that was a bad idea. Yeah, maybe Laurie was a little immature for Meg at 16 or 17, but isn't Meg a little immature for Brooke? They're like 10 or 11 years apart. Meg didn't even get married for a few more years anyways. Laurie could have been more grown up by then. He wasn't, but he could have been in maybe a few more years. She should have waited around to see. If Meg married Laurie, she could be rich and have a happy little family right next door to where her parents live. It's really a perfect situation, unless I have Joe marry Laurie instead. So if I go with the scenario where Laurie marries Joe instead of Meg, then we have to find Meg someone else to marry because she really did want to have a family. So how about this? Aunt March invites Meg to come with her as a companion on a trip to Europe, and Meg meets someone amazing there, who also happens to be like somewhat wealthy. Or maybe Meg could accompany Aunt March on a trip to California and end up marrying Zorro's son Joaquin because he'd be grown up by then. So that's what happens with Meg. Next up is Joe. So if Joe marries Laurie, she doesn't have to marry him right away, but at least Mrs. March isn't going to tell her it's a bad idea. They were best friends for years. They were obviously supposed to get married. Marmee. Joe can keep writing and publishing stuff. She can even go to New York if she wants to be on her own for a while. But eventually she has to marry Laurie. And once they're married, she can keep writing if she wants to, because it's not like married women weren't allowed to write books. Another great thing about Joe marrying Laurie is that they'll both be really generous about sharing their wealth. Joe would also get the perk of living next door to her family. Now if Joe doesn't marry Laurie, and Laurie marries Meg instead, then Joe will become a famous author, selling millions of books, and making enough money to buy a house in the country where she can have a farm and horses. Of course, she remains good friends with Laurie and Meg and the rest of the family, and also starts a horse riding school for kids who can't afford a horse or riding lessons. Now that we've figured out what's happening with Meg, what's happening with Joe, we need to figure out what about Beth? Spoiler alert, we're not going to kill her off. Beth does visit the homeless, but they're not sick from scarlet fever and their baby doesn't die. Beth actually catches scarlet fever from Amy, but more on that later. Beth does catch scarlet fever, but she inexplicably recovers and is in perfect health for the rest of her life. After Meg is married, Aunt March invites Beth and Joe to come with her on another trip to Europe, and on the trip, a famous musician hears Beth play the piano, and Beth ends up becoming a famous concert pianist. When Aunt March dies, she leaves her house to Beth because Meg and Joe already have their own houses. So Beth uses the house to start a music school, which Laurie also helps teach at. And now, finally, let's talk about Amy. I actually have a few ideas of what happens to her. Option 1, death by pickled lime overdose. Option 2, Amy could die from scarlet fever. In this version, she catches scarlet fever from school, and she's actually the person that Beth caught it from. Or Amy could recover from scarlet fever, but just be sort of weak for the rest of her life. And when she's grown up, she can marry Mr. Brooke.
I'm joking!
What Amy does is she goes to Europe on yet another trip with Aunt March. And while they're traveling all over Europe, Amy can get engaged to some guy like Fred Vaughn or somebody else she meets there. Or Amy can come along on one of Beth's tours in the United States, and while Beth is playing a show in Atlanta, Amy could meet Ashley Wilkes, the loser guy from Gone with the Wind, and they can end up getting married. So those are some of the ways that I think that Little Women could be improved. Feel free to comment below any things you'd like to change about Little Women, or if you love it the way it is, feel free to share that below.